No one realized the mistake at first. The bear was standing there again, exactly where it had been seen for days, massive, unmoving, almost calm. From a distance it looked like nothing more than a familiar silhouette against the trees. Some thought it was resting. Others believed it had found a reliable food source nearby. But in that moment, as the wind shifted and the forest went unnaturally quiet, one truth began to surface. This was not a coincidence. The bear wasn't wandering. It wasn't lost. It was waiting. The sound came too late. A low, deep exhale, slow and deliberate, not a warning, not a threat, a confirmation. By the time the hikers froze, the distance between them and the animal no longer mattered. What mattered was the decision they had already made hours earlier without knowing it. The decision to walk this trail. The decision to ignore the signs. The decision that had quietly placed them exactly where the bear wanted them to be. This was the moment everything pointed back to. Days earlier, locals had started mentioning it casually. The same bear, same clearing, same time of day. Rangers heard the reports but didn't panic. Bears often revisited areas during certain seasons. Food cycles, migration patterns, nothing unusual, on paper. But the pattern was too precise. The bear wasn't roaming. It wasn't passing through. It was anchoring itself to one exact location, as if something invisible tied it there. The clearing sat near an old forest road, long abandoned but still used by hikers looking for quieter routes. Tall trees ringed the area tightly, creating a natural funnel. Visibility dropped fast once you stepped inside. Sounds behaved differently there. Footsteps felt louder. Breathing felt closer. Even experienced outdoorsmen described the place as off, though none could explain why. On the first day the bear was spotted, a couple walking their dog turned back immediately. They said the animal didn't react. No charge, no bluff. It simply stood, head low, eyes fixed forward, watching. On the second day, a solo hiker reported the same thing, same posture, same stillness. The bear didn't advance, it didn't retreat, it just remained. By the third day, curiosity replaced caution. Photos began circulating online, blurry images taken from far away. Comments poured in. Some called it fake, others joked about how calm the bear looked. A few suggested it might be injured or sick, but those who knew bears well noticed something unsettling. Its body language was wrong, too controlled, too focused. A bear that feels threatened moves. A bear that is afraid leaves. This one did neither. What no one knew yet was that the clearing wasn't random. Just beyond the tree line, hidden by undergrowth and shadow, ran a narrow path animals had used for years. Deer passed through it regularly. Smaller prey followed. And recently humans had started using it too, unknowingly aligning themselves with the same routes. The bear had learned this, not quickly, not suddenly, but patiently. Observation after observation, day after day. Bears are often underestimated. People think of them as reactive, driven by hunger or fear alone. But this bear had adapted. It had understood timing, movement, predictability. It had learned that humans came through this spot in patterns. Morning hikers, afternoon explorers, weekend groups, always slowing down in the clearing, always exposed. The forest itself seemed to cooperate. Wind masked sound, trees broke sight lines, even the ground dipped slightly, forcing anyone walking through to look down for a moment, just long enough to lose awareness of what stood ahead. Rangers finally planned to close the trail, but bureaucracy moved slower than instinct. Signs hadn't been posted yet. Barriers weren't up. And on that day, the day everything converged, 3 hikers stepped past the last visible marker without realizing they had crossed into a space that no longer belonged to them. As they entered the clearing, the bear was already there, not surprised, not startled. Exactly where it had been every day before. Waiting. And in the silence that followed, the reason for its presence, its patience, its precision, was about to be understood far too late. The first hiker noticed the smell before anything else. A thick, metallic scent mixed with damp earth. It didn't belong to the forest. He slowed instinctively, lifting his head as if his body understood the danger before his mind did. The second hiker took one more step forward, and that was when they saw the bear clearly. It hadn't moved. Its massive frame blended unnervingly well with the shadows, fur darkened by dirt and time spent in that exact spot. The bear's head was slightly lowered, eyes fixed not on their faces but on their center of mass. That detail mattered. Predators that plan do not look wildly, they focus. For a split second, no one moved. The forest seemed to hold its breath. Birds were gone, insects silent. Even the wind had died, leaving the clearing unnaturally still. The third hiker, walking a step behind, whispered something, perhaps a question, perhaps a warning. But the sound barely left his mouth before the bear shifted its weight. It wasn't a charge. That was the most terrifying part. The bear took a slow step forward. Calm. Deliberate. A signal that it had already decided how this encounter would end. Bears that bluff roar, snap their jaws, make themselves larger. This one did none of that. Its confidence came from certainty, not intimidation. One of the hikers raised his arms, trying to appear bigger, just as countless survival guides advised. Another slowly backed away, heel scraping against a stone. That sound, small, accidental, changed everything. The bear stopped again. Its ears twitched, its head tilted slightly, recalculating distance and movement. This was not rage. This was assessment. Years of instinct refined by days of observation in this exact place. The bear had learned how humans reacted here. It knew their hesitation, their confusion, their delayed response. What the hikers didn't realize was that this wasn't the first close encounter. 2 nights earlier, a deer had been taken in the same clearing. No chase, no struggle heard beyond the trees. Rangers later found disturbed soil, flattened grass, and drag marks leading away from the path. At the time, it seemed normal. Predation was expected in a forest like this. But the location, precisely where humans slowed down, should have raised alarms. The bear had eaten well since then. Hunger was no longer the driving force. Control was. As the hikers stood frozen, the bear advanced again, closing the gap with terrifying efficiency. 10 meters, 8, 6. At that distance, there was no room for strategy, only reaction. One hiker shouted, a desperate attempt to break the tension. The sound echoed briefly before being swallowed by the trees. The bear responded instantly. Its movement was explosive, far faster than any of them expected from something so large. The ground shook as it surged forward, not wildly, not blindly, but on a direct line. The hikers scattered, instincts overriding coordination. That was the moment the bear had been waiting for. Predators exploit separation. One man tripped, his foot catching on an exposed root. He fell hard, breath knocked from his lungs. The bear adjusted course mid-stride, angling toward the fallen figure with terrifying precision. The others screamed, waved, threw whatever they could grab, but they were no longer the target. In seconds, it was over. The bear didn't linger. That detail would later haunt investigators. It did what it needed to do and retreated just as swiftly, vanishing into the trees along a path it clearly knew well. No confusion, no hesitation. It left behind silence, and a scene that would soon force everyone to confront the truth they had missed. When rangers arrived hours later, they found more than the aftermath of an attack. They found signs of repeated use, flattened vegetation forming subtle lines through the forest, scents rubbed into trees. Claw marks not from aggression but from marking. The clearing wasn't a Slucci encounter zone, it was territory. The bear had claimed it deliberately, learning that humans passed through without understanding the risk. It had adapted not just to the environment but to people themselves, predicting behavior, timing, even panic. By the time officials finally closed the trail and issued warnings, the damage was already done. The bear had proven something unsettling. It wasn't reacting to humans anymore. It was anticipating them. And the reason it had stayed in that exact spot for days, watching, waiting, was no longer a mystery. It had found a place where prey came to it, unaware, unprepared, and walking straight into its world. The forest was sealed off within hours. Yellow tape cut through the trees like an artificial scar. Warning signs nailed hastily to trunks that had stood untouched for decades. Rangers moved carefully now, not because the bear was nearby, but because they finally understood what they were dealing with. This was no random incident, no startled animal reacting out of fear. This was a calculated outcome, shaped by days, perhaps weeks, of silent observation. Tracking teams followed the trail the bear had used to retreat. The path was disturbingly clear, broken branches bent at shoulder height, soil compacted by repeated use. This wasn't an escape route formed in panic, it was a corridor. One the bear had walked many times before, long before the attack ever happened. Each sign reinforced the same conclusion. The bear had planned around this place. Motion cameras were installed overnight, not to capture proof but to confirm what many already suspected. Within the first night, the footage showed the bear returning to the edge of the clearing. It stopped at the tree line. Stood there, watched. Not confused, not searching. Simply present, as if expecting something that never came. It stayed for nearly 20 minutes. That detail changed everything. Predators that succeed usually leave an area quickly, driven by instinct to avoid retaliation or competition. This bear did neither. It remained close, confident in its understanding of the terrain and the absence of immediate threat. It wasn't dominance alone, it was familiarity. The forest, the clearing, the path, even the human schedules had become part of its mental map. Wildlife experts brought in to assess the situation reviewed weeks of local reports. Patterns emerged that no one had connected before. Campers mentioning a feeling of being watched. Hikers describing a sense of pressure in the clearing. Dogs refusing to move forward at that exact point. All dismissed individually, all undeniable when combined. The bear had been learning, not aggressively, not recklessly, slowly. It had watched people pause there, take photos, drink water, lower their guard. It had learned that humans didn't look up immediately, that they hesitated before reacting, that they scattered when frightened. The bear didn't need to chase, it only needed to wait. That was the reason it stayed in that spot for days. Waiting wasn't passive, it was strategy. The decision was made quickly after that. The bear could not be relocated, it wasn't injured, it wasn't starving. And it had crossed a threshold that wildlife officials take seriously. An animal that associates humans with predictable opportunity becomes exponentially more dangerous, not just to hikers but to anyone entering its range. The operation took place at dawn. Fog rolled through the trees, muffling sound much like it had during the attack. Rangers moved in quietly, tracking the bear's movements from the night before. When they found it, the animal wasn't running. It stood near the clearing again, massive and still, exactly where it had been seen so many times before. The same spot. Witnesses later said the bear looked calm, almost indifferent. There was no charge, no sudden movement. When it finally reacted, it was already too late. Afterward, the clearing felt different, empty in a way that was impossible to ignore. The forest sounds slowly returned, birds first, then insects, then wind. But the space the bear had claimed felt exposed now, stripped of the tension that had built there unnoticed for so long. In the following weeks, signs were analyzed, footage reviewed, reports rewritten. The official conclusion was brief and clinical, but among those who knew the forest well, a quieter understanding spread. The bear hadn't been aggressive by nature, it had adapted. It had recognized a pattern humans didn't see in themselves. Predictability, routine, overconfidence. The clearing had become a place where nature tested human assumptions, and won. That was the reason the bear stood there day after day, not lost, not confused, not wandering. It stayed because it had learned something, and the moment people finally understood why, it was already too late.